Okay, we're rolling. All right, now we're rolling. I'm here with Alicia Hopkins. She is going to do a tarot reading for me about Reviewer TV and Reviewer Magazine and where it's going. I'd like to see what the cards have to say about my podcast, Reviewer TV. And can you first tell us a little bit about yourself, Alicia? Where are you from? Where'd you grow up? How'd you grow up?
How did I grow up? Well, I was not hatched out of an egg, although I would like to fabricate that tale. I was born and raised in western North Carolina in a small town called Statesville, which is about an hour and a half directly north of Charlotte. Obviously a white-collar town. I was not brought up in a white-collar community whatsoever. My grandfather was a sharecropper.
Really?
Yes. In fact, I have the paperwork upstairs from the Veterans Administration detailing how much livestock they had on a piece of property in Wilkes County, North Carolina, which is the Brushy Mountains, which is a bit of the foothill country of the Appalachians. A lot of my family immigrated to the United States through the Pennsylvania Avenue because they were Germanic, and they ended up down in the Boone area of the Appalachians. A lot of them were Lutheran. And then slowly but surely, unfortunately, became Southern Baptist and came down out of the hill country and into the Piedmont area. That's just little tidbits of them. They're from all over, actually, of Europe, quite frankly. There's a hodgepodge in there of everything. But I grew up in North Carolina. I escaped North Carolina at 17. I went to the United States Army in the early 90s and got the very terrible GI Bill under the Bush Classic era.
Worse than Reagan?
Well, it was $25,000 and you could only use it for undergrad only, which was not the intent of the Montgomery GI Bill at all whatsoever when it was first founded for World War II veterans. They severely restricted it because, surprise, surprise, they didn't want black people using it, and they didn't care who it hurt when they shrunk its capabilities down. Now it's completely different. Post 9/11, it's $60,000 plus, and they can use it for graduate school, all kinds of things. But it was not like that in the early 90s. So I went in. I was a dental technician, trained as a dental hygienist in the early 90s. This was during the Somalia, Black Hawk Down, unpleasantness in Rwanda and also Bosnia-Herzegovina. So it was a lot of mission preparedness in 3rd Infantry Division, which was still in Germany at that time. It is no longer in Europe. Its colors have been furled and it's now stateside. And I was in the Army for 4 years. I got out in the mid-90s, moved back to North Carolina, went to undergraduate at UNC Charlotte for chemistry, and then went on to graduate school at Florida State University for a master's in chemistry. I studied as a PhD candidate in statistical mechanics and biochemistry. And now I am a nerdy medical communicator, writer for the evil, horrendous pharmaceutical industry. There is a team of one that has morality, so at least give yourself some comfort in that. I have been fired for my integrity, and I'm not unashamed to say that in the past.
How'd that happen?
I was working for what is now a Chapter 11 company. It was a medical device. They had a questionable product, and I was a preclinical trial manager, which means I managed and led animal studies prior to going into humans or in parallel with humans, depending on how you're structured when you come in, et cetera, et cetera. However, I was running rabbit and pig studies, and I had a rabbit that, quite frankly, had a stroke on study, and I had them euthanize said rabbit and do a necropsy, and it had polymer in its brain. And I was quite upset over that, and I was also quite upset that they sent terrible product with me to a study I had at Emory University, and I told my VP as much, and she did not like me for that, so she fabricated a lie to justify terminating me. And it blacklisted me for quite a few years. I became a massage therapist and then turned my career around and became a medical communicator, and now I'm on the side of the law in pharmacy, so I don't get too many arguments when I bring up FDA guidances. And that's that story. How did I get into divination? Well, I was born to do that, as many divinators are. I have a deck of tarot cards here. These are not traditional Rider-Waite decks, which a lot of readers base their interpretations on. The deck I've chosen today is called the Tarot of the Sidhe, which is spelled S-I-D-H-E, which one, if you don't understand the Scottish Highlands, that's the Sidhe are the fae folk, the fair folk of Scotland. I tend to like the fantastical, which includes the wee folk. Every tradition, I think, on this planet has their own tale of the wee folk, their fair folk. Even our beloved indigenous of the Turtle Island many tribes have their own adversaries and assistants from the fairy realms and have their own tales as such. In fact, the Choctaw, which I'm very familiar with, have fantastic tales on how wildflowers come about, or through the fairies that come and bring wildflowers every year, and tales such as that. So I like to use those types of energies because they are our allies to our beautiful planet Earth that I think we should all be fascinated and taken care of in this day and age. Most of the tarot nowadays that you see, a lot of them do interpretations based on astrology, because there are particular signs and planets that are associated with certain cards. I don't typically do that, even though I do understand that methodology. Tarot, as it's used in an occultic divination form, did not really start until, I think, the early 19th century. The cards existed much earlier as that, as a card game in Europe. I think like the trump cards, your royal suits, those came into the deck, I think, around 1420s in Germany. The deck itself, without that trump set, was in Italy, and most of the north of Italy and into Florence, I want to say around the 1500s. And then it was after that it became more of a divination tool. That's not to say there weren't other divination methods. I think even archaeology has found evidence that even Neanderthals may have used osteomancy, throwing the bones, to do some form of divination for themselves. So it's in our DNA to want to know the future and how we can act and maybe not even react on what can happen to us. I like to do simple readings. I don't do elaborate readings with Celtic crosses and things. I love people when they can do that and fantastic stuff. I am much more just the facts man kind of a thing. That's how I approach spirit, and that's how I approach the cards. So when I do a reading, if you have a question, quandary, I just pull a card, where are you at, what should you do, and what should you not do? And then we'll go from there.
Okay. So for me to have a reading for my purposes, I sit down, I guess, what do I first cut the deck, or?
I'm going to shuffle, and then I'm going to knock, and then we're going to do a reading.
Okay. Pull out here. Pull back. Properly flip framed. All right. So, hi.
So you have your question.
I do have my question.
Okay, you just think about your question.
What's my destiny, Mom?
That's too big of a question.
I'm looking to get maybe a little bit of, find out what you have to say about Reviewer TV, because you first know me from Reviewer Magazine when I was publishing Reviewer Magazine for many years.
Yeah, that was a long time ago.
Covering the arts and music and the club scene and fashion and stuff like that.
We no longer have a club scene in San Diego.
Right, yeah. What was left of it was killed by the pandemic, I think, and then...
Well, and I think Flux,
economy.
From what I was reading, really didn't play by the rules.
Oh, really?
And they got shut down.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
They kept trying to stay open.
It's on an island and
yeah, right over there, yeah.
They used to be Club Berlin. Sybil's Down Under many years ago, and that's where I started.
I like that name better.
It was a good book.
All right.
Yeah, the late 80s, early 90s were a lot of fun. But
that was true for everywhere.
yeah. knocking on it, you're shuffling it, that's a new deck, right? Are new decks better, like just like in Vegas with playing cards, or do you prefer older used decks?
This is a deck I have used. I don't know if I would call it new, but it's definitely not used.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's not frayed or anything.
Yeah, exactly. But that would be better. You like them brand new, where they're not all tattered and torn and dog-eared, where you can cheat.
So this deck is very interesting in that they don't use a traditional cups or wands or swords or pentacles. So in this deck, I like the way that the author makes a little poem with each of these. I don't feel like pulling the book out and reading that. It's just a little 3-liner thing. So cups here are dancers, wands are warriors, and then the coins are makers, and the swords are an air element. I forgot what they called it in this deck. I'll have to look it up. But with your question, you landed on what would be the Ace of Cups, the dancer. So you're asking for something that's emotional and wish fulfillment. Yes.
Okay.
Which is success with Reviewer TV. That's where you stand today. But you're wanting to know, can my wish come true?
Mm-hmm.
Basically. So what should you do? Well, you got the King of Cups, the Dancer King, which is a gift of wisdom, which is to go with intuition, creativity, go with the flow, never rush into anything, which is what you got as what you shouldn't do, which is the Ace of Wands, which is all about fire. It can be sexual energy as well, which is always very hot, fast, and never lasts. Let's be real. It burns out quickly.
You're making me blush.
It's true, though, right? I mean, when we're young, we're bold, we think we know everything, and it turns out we don't know anything. So it's more about using your worldly wisdom, quite frankly, and your intuition, and feeling out what your possibilities are in the sea of your dreams. Yeah, there are opportunities that exist there in creativity.
Okay.
So it's all about seeing those possibilities. And the king is the king. So be the king.
Which one's the king? The Dancer King, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that in the Rider-Waite deck would correspond with what?
The King of Cups.
Okay.
Yeah. And this would be the Ace of Cups. It's called just the Dancer in this particular deck. And then the Warrior here is the Ace of Wands in the Rider-Waite deck.
Okay.
Which you can see him. He's riding literally lightning out of a volcano. And he's holding a bolt of lightning. And a red sun is essentially busting out of this warrior's chest. So we all recognize that energy of burning in, coming in hot, and then...
It's like he's leaning over backwards.
Yes, because that sun is coming straight out of the solar plexus in the chest. Yeah. In other words, don't rush into anything. If somebody presents you a contract, take your time. Opportunities, yeah. That's always a good piece of advice, regardless of the cards.
Do you think that one of the reasons why you've become a success, or you're so strong-willed, is because of your background as a sharecropper, child of sharecropper?
Yes.
Yeah.
My mother was a single parent as well. And in the early 70s to mid-70s, being a single mother was not a good look where I was from. It was very frowned upon, shunned. In fact, I have a twin sister, and many times, especially even in high school, we had teachers, because we had our mother's last name, and they were familiar. We had 4 uncles. My mother had no sisters. And they would ask us, so are you so-and-so's daughter, one of our uncles? And it would be like, no, I'm Mary's daughter. And they would turn around and walk away.
Small town.
Yeah. Everyone knew everyone. So there was no escaping it, which is unfortunate. In fact, my mother remembered a time that year. We were born in August, and that January, you know how the first children of the January 1st is always given, you know, like special gifts of the community because they're the first babies born in the new year and things like that. That happens here in San Diego as well. They usually get some kind of little blurb in the news. Oh, the first baby was born at Sharps at, 2 minutes past, and usually they get a little special something. That particular year in 1974, they found out that the lady whose baby was the firstborn of that year was a single parent, and they took all of it away. Oh, because how dare they have? Oh, wow. They can't do that. They had to be married. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
That was in the early 70s.
Yes.
That was during the whole the women's lib revolution, and there was a lot of civil rights going on. Things were changing in many parts of the country, but apparently in the low country of Appalachia, it was still pretty. It was
definitely not embracing of the civil rights movement from the late 60s. Roe v. Wade had passed in 73, and women were able to get credit cards and this and that. This still was very unacceptable for women to be single parents.
And this was in North Carolina?
North Carolina.
Where about? With Ashland or where?
No, this was in Statesville. So this was more Piedmont, an hour north of Charlotte, an hour and a half. So still very rural in that regard, even though Statesville would argue they're not. Yes, they are. Very much a lot of farming community. The primary crop was tobacco. Still is.
Oh, yeah.
More eastern is now pork, the swine, pig community. The feeds basically the United States, their pork consumption. And unfortunately, that community's been hit very hard with all sorts of chemical agents to keep insects at bay from the tobacco and things like that. I see a lot of people that I grew up with, their parents are now suffering dementia in much more larger numbers than I ever remember as a kid. And I think that there's some correlation with all of the different toxins that they use for farming. That's not conspiratorial in any way. It's a fact. In the early 70s, North Carolina explicitly used Agent Orange on kudzu to try to get rid of it.
Oh, wow.
They didn't really talk about that. In fact, they got rid of their eugenics programs just in 1974 as well in North Carolina.
Yeah, well, California had that going on too.
Yeah.
Till the 70s.
Yeah, so the same thing was there as well. I don't think we had as much as California, where we did not have the institutions where your husband could just drop you off at the mental hospital and say, hey, she's nuts, give her a lobotomy and then send her back. We didn't have that as much as like California because California had the money for that. That's where the whole Stepford Wives came from.
Okay.
Yeah, it was, my wife, let's dope her up on alcohol and methadone. That's
She's crazy.
Yeah. Unfortunately, you saw that with Betty Ford, her alcoholism and her drug addiction and her inability to handle her life. And I think that was much more upper middle class. Obviously, poor people like me, now they just feed them opioids, unfortunately, and vampire off of them in that regard. Now that all the factories and the coal mines and things like that are now closed. So basically, the only way out is through, which was the United States military. And now I don't know how many people actually take that out anymore.
Well, it worked for you. You got away from that, and now you're a much greater success than what you came from. But you know how some people, when they're growing up, their parents were always, well, I grew up in the Depression. We had nothing. I want to make sure you have everything that we had. We didn't have. And so they grow up, at least in Southern California, where I'm from, they came from middle-class families where they were pretty much given everything, and that's what they were used to.
Yeah.
So they don't really have that internal drive.
Right.
So you apparently had the opposite effect. You had
because
you
I
were
wasn't
deprived.
given anything.
Yeah, you were deprived, so you became much more motivated to succeed and to get an education, an upper level education, and to do things like that.
Yeah. The piece of property I grew up in, we actually even had an acre that was set aside for a garden. So we even still grew quite a bit of our own vegetables. And
So you feed yourself and share.
And we
share
canned,
crop.
and we did that, and my uncles would hunt and things like that.
What exactly is sharecropping? How does that work?
So sharecropping works by, you have a farmstead, it is not yours, it belongs to someone else. But you work the land, and there is a portion of your crop and or livestock you have that you will produce, and a part or percentage of that goes back to the owner of the property.
You don't pay rent, but you pay in crops.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and you have no stake in the land whatsoever. Yeah, so it's actually even worse than like a rental situation. You have no rights really. So if you have a bad season, well, you're out on the street.
Do they still do that?
I
Is it
don't
legal?
even think that it's legal, but I don't swear to that.
Okay. Okay.
Because we may be going back to that. Who knows?
Yeah, wouldn't. Yeah. Well, this was this went quick. Is that the reading? 3 cards?
That's how I like to do it. I don't do, I know some like to do Celtic Cross, and there's 12 cards and and things like that. I like to get to the cut to the chase is, you know, if you want to succeed in that, you're going to have to be the king and take charge of that. However, you're going to have to mitigate any sort of rushing into anything, because mitigate your passions.
Okay.
Be a little bit more even keeled.
Control them.
Yes. And always read the fine print.
Is that what the top one stands for?
This top one is the Ace of Cups, which is, to me, it's the best card in the deck.
Okay.
It's all about wish fulfillment. It's kind of like, if you want to look at it as the Holy Grail, which is yourself, what you actually want for yourself, what you magnify for yourself, your dreams. And I think for you, this could be wish fulfillment, and at least that's how you emotionally are seeing it. Cups are all about emotion. Water is our emotion.
Isn't everything wish fulfillment or about wish fulfillment?
Inevitably, yes. However, we like to compartmentalize and disassociate from that, because as so many of us have experienced disappointment, and sometimes that disappointment keeps us in a cesspool of our own depression to where we have to kind of just keep swimming and get up there and keep your head above water.
Yeah, that's the wish. That's the goal. Well, thank you, Alicia.
Yeah.
That is a very informative and educational reading. Learn a little bit about the origin of tarot cards and a little bit about what's going on with Reviewer TV, a little bit about yourself. Thank you for your background. I appreciate you opening up about that.
Yes.
Maybe sometime we can do a more in-depth video about sharecropping and the perils of being a child in the Appalachians. Is that the way you pronounce it, or do you prefer Appalachians?
Oh, Appalachian is wrong.
Oh, it is?
I say it's wrong.
So it's Appalach.
You put some like when you say y'all, it should come from the solar plexus.
Got it.
Y'all. You know, with some soul and some feeling.
That's nice.
Yes.
Thank you. He did the Twitter files. He's on there. Anyway, let me pay you and have you sign the models release. She's signing the models release. I got to get a video. She didn't bring her ID, even though she looks like she might be over 18. I can trust her.
Way over 18.
And I said 35. Do you have $5? No, here you go, the tip.
That's my tip, yeah.
$5 tip. There you go.
There you
Really
go.
appreciate this. Thank you, Alicia. You're awesome.
I'll be 50 in August, so yeah, I'm way past.
That's great. Look at those eyes. Beautiful eyes. Yeah, it was like, that was how I first met you. You were a fashion model with Medivog.
Yep.
When I was doing fashion coverage for Reviewer magazine. And I was all, look at this beautiful girl. She has beautiful blue eyes, blonde hair, woohoo. But you hear that all the time, I know. The medical industry, you probably get hit on all the time by doctors and stuff.
Oh, that or I'm not taken seriously. Oh, look at this dit.
Yeah.
And then I come out guns blazing.
Love it.
Like, oops.
Love it. That's good.